Hello and welcome back to another Giant Slayer TFT Top 10 video. Today we'll be talking about the top 10 tips for the first patch of the mid-set, 11.15. There's always little things a player can do to improve, especially in a game like TFT that's always evolving. This is especially true when a lot of changes come to the game, as is the case with the mid-set. We'll talk about scouting, items, and a few out-of-game things that you can do to help ease yourself into the mid-set. With all that said, let's go ahead and get started. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come. Be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video. The first tip of our top 10, coming in at number 10, is to use references in cheat sheets. Basically, there's a lot of new information at the beginning of new sets as well as the mid-set. New champions and traits, mechanics added or removed, item changes, etc. So much new information, it's easy to get overwhelmed and forget things. Dawn of Heroes mid-set is lighter on the champion and trait changes, but there's a lot of new mechanics they've added, as well as the existing ones that they've either changed or removed. To help with this information overload, use cheat sheets. This can be from any source or ones that you make yourself. Even the official TFT patch notes come with a couple of cheat sheets showing the new Radiant items and other useful info. This information can be used any way you want, whether that's just looking it up on a website or having Notepad open with a few key details that you want to remember. The point is to not burden yourself at the start by trying to force feed all the information into your brain. However much assistance you need outside of the game itself is totally fine. After all, this is a game that's meant to be fun and not overwhelming. That said, our number 9 tip expands upon this idea a bit, as it's okay to take your time when learning a new set. Look folks, there's no race here unless you're a top player in the game just trying to rush for rank 1. For everyone else, take your time. Learn all the changes at your own pace, whether that's one game a day or several. Play normals or hyper roll to familiarize yourself with a few of the key changes added before you dive into ranked. However long it takes you to learn what you need to learn before you're comfortable tackling ranked, do so. It's also useful to focus on one specific thing when learning a new set. Maybe you're unsure of how Radiant items work, spend some time looking them up or watching streams. Whichever specific part of the game you're still learning, focus on that first, and then put it all together. This goes hand in hand with having references like a cheat sheet, since those are also tools to help you learn a new set at your own pace. Alright, let's switch over to tips that are more specific to playing the game itself. Coming in at number 8, our tip is to push early levels when playing Draconic. This has always been a way to play around Draconic, but the premise is to use your gold as a means to push your advantage when playing early Draconic. Let's say, for example, you hit Draconic on 2-1. Leveling to 4 is already a common tactic, but you can also look to level to 5 on 2-3. Why do this? Because of a few reasons. 1, it pushes your board advantage. Draconic sometimes struggles to win rounds because the champions don't work all that well together. Leveling quickly lets you play more relevant champions or traits like additional brawlers for Set or Ranger for Ashe. Having an extra unit on your board over another player is also in and of itself an increase in power, meaning you're more likely to win. Another advantage gained through pushing levels is increasing the odds of finding higher cost champions. Being able to hit an early Ashe 2 or Zyra 2 can be the key to going on a win streak. Specifically for the mid-set, the introduction of Galio has made pushing levels even better. This means that you can hit Draconic 5 extremely early in the game, and that means the gold value of your eggs increases dramatically. Lastly, you gain inherent gold from having Draconic eggs. Obviously, they need to hatch first, which does take time, but they will provide you with champions which translate into either board strength or gold. Board strength means that you can generally continue a win streak, and gold means that you can play greedy or push level again for another advantage. Overall, Draconic is a lot more dynamic with the introduction of Galio, so play around with that trait and see what works best for you. Speaking of traits, our number 7 tip is to utilize splash traits. Splash traits are synergies you can easily splash into your comp. The two most common are Ironclad and Mystic, but there's others like Invoker or Revenant. The point of splash traits is to augment your current board by adding in only a few champions. This has also been a key part to playing flexibly in the mid to late game for TFT, and that still rings true for the mid set. Ironclad is great against AD compositions and Mystic against AP comps. Key to effectively using any splash trait is scouting. See what other players are running and decide what you may need. A lot of it does come down to experience, but the first step is scouting. From there, you just need to make the decision of what to add and see how it goes. If it didn't work out, analyze why and try to keep that in mind for the future. Maybe you need 3 Ironclad instead of 2. Maybe Gwen and Fiddle were better Mystics in that lobby instead of Lulu and Lux. There's definitely a lot of nuance to using splash traits well, so get started in utilizing them to further your game knowledge. We've mentioned her, so let's talk about our number 6 tip, how to use Gwen effectively. Gwen is one of the new 5 costs of the mid-set alongside of Action. She's a unique champion both in design and her traits. One of her traits is easy to use, Mystic, but her other trait is the one we want to talk about for this tip specifically, Inanimate. Inanimate makes it so Gwen leaves an AoE mist on the ground around the area she starts combat in. This mist doesn't move and lasts for 8 seconds. All allies that are within the mist gain 33% damage reduction as long as they remain in the mist. A 33% damage reduction is quite significant, especially in conjunction with other defensive tools like healing. There are several ways that you can utilize Inanimate with Gwen. Having her placed near your backline so champions like Aphelios are standing in the mist for the full 8 seconds. Or you can have her placed near the front line to provide extra defense. Utilizing the mist effectively is going to be the hallmark of good Gwen play for TFT, so learning how to use her early will help you later. Keep in mind that players can scout your positioning, so don't be too static with your placement of Gwen. Try moving around each fight to see where the mist is providing the most value, as well as repositioning your board normally. Now is a good time to talk about a couple of tips regarding scouting. Our first scouting tip, coming in at number 5, is to be diligent about scouting against positional-based champions. Position-based champions means any unit that needs to be in the right position to gain value from their ability. The most common example is a champion like Vel'Koz, who aims his laser towards the champion at the center of the battlefield. Scouting and seeing where the enemy Vel'Koz is positioned is key to winning against them, as you want to keep your main carry on the same side as Vel'Koz so you won't hit them with their laser. But Vel'Koz isn't the only positional champion to be aware of. Zyra, Senna, Tristana, Thresh, Kalista, Pyke, Ashe, and Lucian are a few of the other champions that will target their ability towards the furthest away champion. Being aware of which champions have that specifically regarding their ability is step 1 to countering them. Step 2 is scouting. Check how many players are running those champions, especially ones with CC like Zyra, as you want to avoid having your main carry get stunned. Position accordingly based on what you've scouted, and consider using bait units to make sure you're manipulating the targeting of the enemy champion. Heimerdinger's turret, for example, is great for doing this because it's immune to CC, so getting hit by a Zyra stun or Thresh hook won't matter. The point is to be aware of threats you can position against at all points of the game. Being on top of scouting and positioning will likely result in pushing you up a few ranks. Our number 4 tip that also has to do with scouting is to scout when players drop below 40 health to check their Divine Blessing. The Divine Blessing is a new mechanic added in the mid-set that provides a special loot orb to players when they first fall below 40 health. The value of this orb is the same for every player, but the contents can be different. For example, if 2 components drop for someone, you likely won't get the same 2 components for your Divine Blessing. That's why scouting is important. Not only do you gain information on what you might drop when you dip below 40 health, but you also get to see what other players are doing with their drop. Oftentimes this results in a power spike for those players, so it's good information to have. How strong are they after the Divine Blessing? Maybe they got a Nico's help and suddenly have a 2-star 5 cost. That type of information is important to know, and the easiest way to get it is by scouting. Moral of the story is scout. Up next, we have 2 tips regarding the new Radiant item system. Coming in at number 3, our tip is that you should be aware the number of components is a minimum of 10 plus 1 Radiant item. Okay, let's break this down. Previously, the number of guaranteed components, meaning the amount gained from PvE and Carousel, was 12. The cap is still technically 12, but the Radiant item counts towards it, so you're gaining fewer components. Because of that, with the Armory system and Radiant items, hitting the minimum cap of guaranteed components comes a lot earlier in the game. For example, you may end up with 7 or 8 components before 3-6, and the Radiant item drops and you're around 10 total components. That means the bulk of your guaranteed components is already used up after you get the Radiant item. Now, this may not seem like too big of a deal, but it changes quite a few things about the early game usage of components. Slamming early items may not be the best choice anymore. Instead, it's worth holding onto a few of them until you have a better idea of what composition you may be running. Basically, don't paint yourself into a corner early. If you're using all of your rods and tiers for non-AP items, you're now less likely to have them available to play in an AP comp. Same idea for swords, gloves, and bows when it comes to AD items. Our point is this: it's okay to wait to use your components until after 3-6. Sure, use a few of them to gain early advantage, but keep a few on your bench so you have options later on. Next, let's talk about our number 2 tip: use your radiant item effectively. The radiant item system prevents you with 5 choices on round 3-6. Choices are random, so you may not always get exactly what you were looking for. In order to effectively use these items, it's worth doing a few things prior to picking your radiant item. First off, leave your options open. By that, we don't necessarily mean you shouldn't make items prior to 3-6, but don't make all 3 of your carry items before 3-6. Leave yourself a few potential items, even if it means pivoting away from your plan. Second, scout. See what items other players are utilizing early, as it can be a tell for what they may be leaning towards. Having a plan also helps, but again, be open to other options. Utility radiant items are really good, so don't shy away from them either. After you've made your decision, play around the radiant item. AD, play for an AD carry with additional items for them. AP, same thing with an AP carry. Utility items you will need to scout frequently to position them in the best place. One last thing about radiant items is after everyone is picked on 3-6, you should scout to see what everyone else picked. It's important to know what the strength of each of their boards is after choosing a radiant item. It also helps knowing who has a utility item like, say, Radiant Shroud, so you can position around it. Basically, have a plan, but leave yourself open to options on 3-6 and be diligent with scouting. And our number 1 tip for the mid-set is to read the patch notes. This is a quick tip, but arguably the most important. Read the patch notes. This doesn't mean that you have to memorize them, but at least read them to get a general sense of what was changed. Keep them open while playing if you need, but at bare minimum, you should read them prior to playing. Trust us, it will help a lot. So please, read the patch notes. That's going to be it for today's video, folks. There's always ways to improve a game like TFT, and even seemingly minor tips can have a big impact, so we hope these tips will be useful in helping you climb higher and higher on the ladder. Let us know in the comment section below if you have any extra tips to provide. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.